Welcome to this very special Friday edition of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Listen, as a Trump supporter, it was a great week for me. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to carry this high all the way through the holiday season and, of course, into January when our 47th president will be inaugurated once again. Obviously, the moods are high over on the Trump side, but we do have to do maybe a post-mortem on the Democrat Party. What happened? What went wrong? I really want to learn. I want to have the conversation. I want to know how the Democrat Party is going to rebuild. What's next? Who's to blame? And so I want to ask somebody that I really value her opinion on all of this. I'm very interested to see how she feels about the state of the race, the state of her party, the state of America. So joining me now, once again, a friend of the show, former Obama Press Advance Director and Press Advance host, Johanna Maska. I really appreciate you being here, and I just have to know, what are your initial takeaways from what I assume to be kind of a long week for you?
Yeah. Well, first, Tomi, congratulations on the victory. I think, one of the things that we as Democrats have not done enough of is reach out to those who have disagreed with us and say congratulations. And we look forward to working with you on policy agreements when we can. In looking at it, it was a pretty decisive victory for Donald Trump. And it proves that the Democrats' message is not resonating. I'd say the biggest loser of the night was kind of this pod save America, like this mentality that we are going to save America single-handedly. I think people see through that because we need both parties to work together to save America. There was an arrogance that I've been talking about for a while for the Democratic Party that we've got to get rid of to move the country forward.
Were you surprised that Donald Trump won? First question. And second follow-up to that, were you surprised that he won by that much? I'll tell you, yeah. I thought Donald Trump was going to win, but I thought it was going to be a little bit closer. So I'm wondering your takeaways from that victory.
I'm with you. I thought that Harris was going to be able to pull it off, but just barely. I mean, Joe Biden, I had said to Ben LaBolt, who's President Biden's communications director, back in January of last year or March of last year, or somewhere between then, I don't think we should play Weekend at Bernie's here, like run a very elderly candidate. And we did. Then we didn't have a primary, and we didn't even have an open process for a nomination when Kamala Harris took the reins over from Joe Biden. Those things, I think, gave people a reason to worry about the Democrats' truthfulness. And so subsequently, here we are trying to play catch up in the last 100 days. And David Plouffe, I was on a call with David Plouffe like 2 weeks before the election, and I could see he was exhausted. And he believed that it was going to be very close, like the polls were saying, in every battleground state, but that we'd be playing in the battleground states. And when you started seeing the, numbers came in, I kept thinking, okay, Georgia and North Carolina, they're like cherry on top. What we need is Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. When Pennsylvania came in, I mean, that's when it's all over. And it wasn't a game. And then even more so, he made significant ground in blue states, which shows that some of the policies that people have been promoting aren't necessarily working. And you saw that in California, where voters overwhelmingly got rid of George Gascon, who I had actually voted against the last time, and my husband voted for him. And I was like, I think this guy is a carpetbagger. He moved from San Francisco. He messed up Los Angeles, and we just booted him out.
Yeah, and Prop 36, I think, was also big. Kamala refused to tell the American people how she voted on Prop 36, which I think was a big missed opportunity. Not that it really matters now, because I think she's a non-factor now. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, I know that you're obviously very tuned into this, very knowledgeable. Do you think that there's anything that the Kamala campaign could have done to have made this a closer race or even to have won?
They made some mistakes. I mean, and I don't want to blame them because, look, I think they were trying in the last 100 days to pull together a campaign. But right after the Democratic convention, there was an opportunity to just get her out and talking to everybody. And she should have talked to Joe Rogan and literally everybody, including, Tommy, we talk all the time. And I think that's part of the problem is that she really stayed in the media ecosystem that Democrats live in already, which is like Charlemagne the God is, the person who she's talking to the most. I thought she needed to do interview after interview, drive town radio, and she wasn't. I think, again, I don't know all the reasons for that, how much they had to do to play catch up, but Democrats were not out there with their message. And then there were some messages like, I didn't think that we have a to-do list and he has a, enemy list. Yeah, like everybody has enemies. I hope that we don't see any persecution of our enemies. And I think we can discuss like what we want to see in a Trump administration. I think there's a lot of opportunity for compromise and coming together. And I think we'd be stronger as a country if we actually did that and we didn't make people just have, single party legislation. But, she was talking about that instead of talking about what she actually wanted to do to keep America safe and for American jobs.
I think that she just was not ready for this. And I don't know if she'd ever be ready, to be honest with you. I don't think that she's a good candidate. I also don't think that she's a good politician. I don't think that she does well with policy or governing. I just don't. I think there's a reason during the Biden administration that Kamala was sent to do the ribbon cuttings, and then they tried to revamp her several times. I just don't think that the woman is ready for prime time, and I don't think that this is the job for her. I really don't. And I think now she's going to be sent back to California, and I don't think she's going to do anything in politics again. I think that she's going to be a scarlet letter. Nobody's going to want to attach themselves to her. Whereas I think Joe Biden, because he wasn't the one that lost to Donald Trump, I think that after some years pass, Joe Biden's legacy is actually going to look better than Kamala Harris's legacy because at least he beat Trump. Whatever you think about 2020, he was able to get it across the finish line. She wasn't. Now, part of the reason she lost is because of Joe Biden's policies. I think it really did come down to groceries. I think people went to the grocery store and they said, listen, I don't like this. I liked it better under Trump. We're going to give him another chance because as much as I don't like his personality, I really liked his economy. I think that's what it came down to, that and the border. But I think she's a bad candidate. I do want to say this, though, in the spirit of love and light and generosity. I appreciated her concession speech. I think that it maybe could have come a little earlier, but I appreciated it. And I appreciated that though she didn't say congratulations, I do appreciate that she had a unifying message. And I do appreciate the fact that she didn't blame voters for being sexist and racist. I give her credit for that.
Well, and I agree with you to some extent. When I watched her concession speech, though, I thought she's going to run again. I think she does have a coalition, and she'll probably come back to California. Now, what I want us to do in California is not just resist, but rather come to the table with policy solutions. Like, for example, on immigration, I do not want my neighbors who have children in the public school to be deported. I want us to come about with comprehensive immigration reform that gets people into a place where they can legally immigrate to our country because they can work and they can pay taxes. I would like us to have that solution instead of just saying, we're not going to cooperate with you at all, and you're not coming into our state. We've got to come to the table with solutions. I do think, though, you're going to see Kamala Harris in the aftermath of all of this. You're going to see her get to a point where she has a popularity, she has a base. She may even come back to California and run for governor. I mean, we have Gavin Newsom is out very soon. Gavin Newsom, of course, he wants to run for president. So I think it's not the end for California politicians, but unfortunately, I think the Democratic Party has pretty much proven we don't want a California politician. We want someone new. We want someone who's going to bring about jobs and manufacturing for the middle of the country.
Yeah, best of luck to her if she does want to do something. California would be the only place where I believe that she could win anything, and I'm still not convinced she could win in California. I don't think Californians like her. I really don't. I think that the people that lived under her when she was a DA, she's a prosecutor. I think that they felt like she locked too many people up. I think that there's a lot of resentment for that. And I think others in California don't like the way that she was in the Biden administration. I just don't think she's actually as popular even in California. But I do want to ask you about the racist, sexist stuff. Kamala hasn't said it. I give her credit. Hillary, that's all she could say after she lost. And she's still saying it. I lost because people are sexist. That's why I lost. Kamala's not saying that, but people in the media are saying it for her. And I want to play a little montage, not only of that, but some of the meltdowns that we've been seeing in the last several days. Let's take a look at it, and I want your thoughts on how effective you think this is.
Donald Trump has run 3 presidential races. He won 2 and he lost 1. The one that he won the first time was against a woman. The one that he won this time was against a woman. The one that he lost was to a man, a white guy. How much did latent or otherwise maybe obvious trepidation about voting for a woman played into this?
If you look at Trump's ads, Bidenomics is working. Whoever came up with Bidenomics needs to be put in the corner someplace.
My generation, Generation X, the people who grew up on WWE and Hulk Hogan and Donald Trump did this. They did this. They are the ones who looked in the face of somebody who said, I want to be a dictator on day one. We did this. We did this to our kids.
We have this very funky and terrible system called the Electoral College, which decides elections in a way that's totally different than every other election in the United States decided, and the way that anything's decided anywhere else in the world. We should scrap it.
Nobody wanted Donald Trump to be president. Nobody wants Donald Trump to be president more than Bibi Netanyahu, who is backed by a far-right coalition that would like to clear-cut Gaza, that would, would truly like to complete a complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza.
Do you think that Joy Reid is helpful to your party? Because if she were a member of my party saying those things, maybe from a different perspective, I would say that she's really detrimental to it.
I mean, I was watching MSNBC for just a minute the other day, and they were like, oh my God, DC's mourning and everybody's at the spas. And I'm like, wow, you didn't learn a single lesson from this election. Like, this is so embarrassing. And the problem is, I'm not going to be able to silence MSNBC. They're pretty big. I am most worried about this, this racist, sexist, connotation and all of this. We've built Donald Trump up to be this massive racist. And it obviously did not show in the polls. I mean, you saw him actually make the Republican Party more diverse. And I like that. I believe in equality that believes that no one should have the same views just because of their race or their gender or, anything. So, I think it's good that Donald Trump has diversified the Republican Party. But I'm very worried, Tommy, and a lot of people aren't saying this out loud. January 20th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Washington, D.C., where we saw massive Black Lives Matter protests. And I am very worried about anybody saying that this was the victory because of racism or because of sexism, because then I think you stir the pot for what could be very dangerous on January 20th. And that is the last thing I want to see. I want to see a peaceful transition of power. I want to see people working together. And I don't want people to use any excuses of sexism or racism, but rather talk about issues.
Yeah, no, I hope the same. I'm also wondering, to that point, if you think that your former boss, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, do you think that, two things, do you think that they helped Kamala with some of their messaging, kind of talking down to Black men? Do you think that was helpful to her? And two, do you think now that they're pushing for Kamala and they kind of put her in the position that she's in, do you think that their influence within your party might be fading?
I don't think their influence is fading. I think they've made some mistakes. And I think, it's hard for Barack Obama to be the same person he was when we were, driving in minivans in Iowa. So I think he thought he was the kind of person who could address an issue that the Democrats were seeing in their polling. They were seeing that Black men were not supporting Kamala Harris. And I think he thought that he could address that. In the way he did it, I think he wanted it to be casual and engaging, and I don't think it came off as that. Like, I've talked to a lot of my friends, Black men who did find that very offensive. I am not a black man. I was, part of the white women who I thought suburban white women that I thought would come out more for Kamala Harris. And it proved that a lot of people in that category also had doubts about, Kamala Harris. And what was interesting to me, Tommy, is you had a lot of people coming out and saying, yes, they want abortion rights, but they also want Donald Trump. And I think that Donald Trump should also, they should see that in the Republican Party too. And maybe we should bring about more abortion rights.
Well, so here's my thing on that. I actually said it before the election that there is going to be a wave of pro-choice Trump voters. And that's exactly what happened. And it's because, whereas if they had a ballot initiative where they could vote in a more pro-choice direction, or they could vote down abortion restriction initiatives, they would do that, but then they would also tick the box for Donald Trump. Why? Because as important as abortion rights are to them, groceries, safety and security, more important to them. But also, I do believe, because I'm one of them, I believe that there is a pro-choice Trump voter out there that believes Donald Trump and J.D. Vance when they say, we're not going to sign a national abortion ban. We brought it back down to the states. The states are going to decide, and we're going to leave it there. I believe Donald Trump when he says that. And also, Jana, you know better than I, it's never going to get to the point where there's a national abortion ban. You think Congress, with the way that it is now, is ever going to bring a national abortion ban to Donald Trump's desk to even put him in the position to sign it? I think that your party missed on the messaging there because people didn't buy that.
Well, you're going to see Lisa Murkowski and, you've got Republican women who have been pro-choice for a long time. And I think that would be the benefit of this is if we have the parties not so dogmatic on abortion, that we could actually bring about policy that the majority of Americans want. Like, just don't get involved in our bedrooms. Like, if we can just get to that point, that would be great. And we can absolutely have the debate about, if there is ever a child who is alive, like this whole notion that Donald Trump is saying that Democrats want, children to be killed after they're born. That's not true. Like, none of this is true. We just want women to have the right to have an abortion. And a lot of men want that too. So yeah, I would like to see that. I don't think, I agree with you. It's going to be hard for the Republican Party to even get a national abortion ban.
And I don't think it's the priority. I think for some on the religious right, it might be a priority, but I think by and large, it's not the priority of the Republican Party. And I would also say this, because I speak to Republicans about this all the time. If Kamala didn't have abortion as her main talking point, she would have had nothing. So if Republicans didn't put themselves in the position to, be going after certain abortion rights or maybe have bans that I thought were too strict, I think it would have been a walloping like you've never seen before. Like, I think Donald Trump would have won all 50 states, to be honest with you. So that's something that the Republican Party is going to need to reckon with. And I think J.D. Vance said that in the debate with Tim Walz. Like, hey, listen, my party's not great on this, and the people need to decide. So I think that issue will probably be tabled. It'll be left where it is. The states will decide. And I don't think a national abortion ban is something that anybody should worry about. It's just not going to happen. And I will eat my words if it ever does, but I'm telling you, I really don't think that my party is going to put that forward. I really don't. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are as far as what the Democrat Party does now. Is it a resistance message? Do they work with Donald Trump on some things? Or are we going to see what we saw in 2017, where it's just like everything he does, we're going to stonewall and we're going to impeach him and we're going to make his life hell? Like, do you think that's what your party's going to do?
I pray that we don't. To your point, it's funny because my husband and I were having this conversation. If we didn't have social issues as a debate, I think there would be a lot of issues that, would be different in terms of, who would support what party. And I think if the Democrats want to be successful, and I'm one who care a lot about policy, there is a lot of room for compromise in this party. And, I'm not necessarily a fan of RFK Jr., but when he's talking about not having 16 ingredients in Fruit Loops, okay, yeah, I'm on board. So like, why do we resist everything? It is stupid and it doesn't work for the American people. So I'm going to keep singing that hymn everywhere I can. And I've said, like 2 weeks ago, even I was with Sean Spicer at the University of Arizona saying, I think we need to talk about policies and figure out where areas where we can agree. And I am still that person. And I hope that Democrats can be those people moving forward. There are going to be some who are still, the peacocks, and we'll see what happens in the media. Like, that's another space. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in the press briefing room now that he's won by a decisive victory and who's going to be the press secretary and what that dynamic is going to be like.
I would hope it would be different. Like, if you have real legitimate policy disagreements with what Donald Trump does, like, by all means, ask the questions. I would just hope we don't go down the path again of, oh, you're Hitler, or in the dumb questions that don't matter to the American people. Like, let's move on from that. Let's ask about the policies that he's enacting or proposing. And then let's move on from all the other BS, because I think people are over it. They're tired of it. Like, let the man actually govern, because that's his mandate from the American voter. The last thing I want to ask you about, which is maybe not a big issue in this election, but I do think it mattered to the Hispanic men and maybe even to the black men out there and just men in general. I think this notion of men and women's sports might be a sleeper issue, but I think some folks, when they were looking at the Democrat Party, and maybe it's a little too woke for me, maybe it's a little too extreme for me, I think maybe some of those former Democrat voters were looking at an issue even like that's not even a presidential issue, and they thought, you know what? I don't want men in the locker room with my girls. Maybe that's something the Democrat Party needs to look at as well.
Well, I've always, the pronoun debate that was like, and now it's a little while ago, but like, I remember, I set up bilateral meetings with President Xi, and I always joked, like, what would I do if I was setting up a bilateral meeting with President Xi and I was so woke, it was like President Xi, he, him. Like, it matters to a certain segment of people. And if anybody tells me their pronouns, I'm going to use their pronouns. Like, I'm going to be respectful. I think when it comes to issues like transgender sports, they're such a local issue, and we have all of this venom, and what ends up happening is then kids are bullied, and I have no idea what's going through the mind of a child who thinks they're a different gender. And, I've never experienced that. I've never had a child who's experienced that, but I just think that we shouldn't bully kids like in this way that, I think we should have this conversation. And I know a lot of co-ed sports in these days here. We get so much oxygen about it. And sure, we can have this discussion, but I just don't want us bullying anybody. And we've just bullied people, and it just sucks.
Yeah, I don't believe in bullying anybody either, but I think there's a big difference between bullying people. If you want to be trans or you want to cross-dress or whatever, like, I quite frankly don't care. Like, Caitlyn Jenner is a friend of mine. I don't care what people do. Like, I'm a very freedom-first person. However, I do draw the line when there are transgender women competing in women's sports, taking away opportunities from female athletes. I also don't think it's fair that young women in middle school or high school have somebody that's transgender that has a full penis in their locker room. All this talk from the left about Me Too and, consent and all that. These women don't consent to seeing a fully intact male standing in their locker room. I don't think it's right. I think it's too far. And I think there's a big difference between bullying somebody for their personal preference and saying this is just a line that we're not going to cross because it's unfair to the women.
Well, I think it's a small number of people, but I agree if it happened and, I had a child in a locker room. Look, I don't want children in locker rooms with creeps, period, of any gender. But if you have somebody who's that close to your kid who's, a man, like, I think it's, it's a little concerning. It was interesting because I just flew into Kansas City and they had non-gender bathrooms. And I was like, we don't have that in LA. But what it did was actually have privacy for each person. And the lines were amazing. And I was like, can we just solve this problem in a different way and give everyone privacy? Because, that's one thing I would say as a mom of a boy, I wanted to make sure I wasn't sending him in a men's restroom with a bunch of men. So, if you can get people privacy to do their own thing and solve this problem, that would be for the best. Happy to have the conversation on, women's sports and everything. I just think it's a small problem compared to all of the other problems that we have as a society.
It seems like a small problem, but it's a problem that's getting worse. It's becoming more normalized. It's not just Leah Thomas anymore. It's becoming far more prevalent. You've got San Jose State that has a transgender on the team spiking volleyballs in the face of girls. And I just think that that's a line that most reasonable, rational people draw. And they say, this is too much for me. So I just do think that the Democrat Party, if they want to continue and get votes, I think that they need to reckon with how woke it's gotten and maybe come back to the middle a little more. I think the Republican Party has done that. I think that the Republican Party, used to be against same-sex marriage and against this and that. And I think the Republican Party has moderated itself a lot on that issue, which I'm happy to see as somebody who's maybe more socially liberal in certain cases. I think the Democrat Party needs to do the same. And that would be, I think, in my opinion, better for your party. But I don't know if they're there yet or they double down on woke. I don't know what the trajectory looks like. But I'm thinking after this, it's time to do a post-mortem, and I'm hoping that they're doing it behind the scenes.
Well, I think everybody's having interesting conversations. I mean, I was just on with someone who's a Democrat who's been singing the same hymnal that I have been, that we should work with the Republicans. And those of us who are coming together and trying to figure out, okay, how do we look at the future of the Democratic Party in a different way than my colleagues, some of them, the Pod Save Bros who had so much oxygen the last time. So there's a lot of us who are having those moments. I think there's not one leader right now of the Democratic Party. I mean, Kamala Harris will probably run again, but there's not just one person leading the party. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of rebuild at the grassroots level.
Well, and in closing, I will say this. 2028 is not going to be easy for Republicans because Democrats do have some bright faces on the horizon, Shapiro being one of them. I don't count Gavin Newsom in that category, although I'm sure he will run. I think he will be easily defeated, but I'm sure he's going to run. But I do think that it's going to be a tough election for Republicans in 2028, depending on how these next 4 years go. I think they're going to go well, but either way, Donald Trump is going to be a non-factor after that, and both Republicans and Democrats are going to have to decide what their party looks like moving forward, and it's not going to be easy for either side. So I'm hopeful for that, though. I'm hopeful for all the things that you're saying, and I'm hoping that we can come to just some kind of a consensus with competing ideas, but with more open dialogue. And I always love having it with you. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today. And thank you for always being so moderate in some ways, but also very brave and bold to have the conversations is what we need more of.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Tomi, and I look forward to more conversations as Donald Trump even announces his administration picks. So This will be fun.
I look forward to it, and I look forward to coming back on your podcast sometime soon as well to speak about my perspective to your audience. So thank you so much.
Would love it.
Talk to you soon. All right, folks, that does it for this very special, very illuminating and enlightening episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless, reaching across to the other side of the aisle. It's not so scary over there, I promise. But I hope you all have a wonderful, fantastic weekend. Knock back a few drinks, have some celebrations. We all deserve it. And now we can go into the holiday season with love, light, joy, and Donald Trump as our 47th president very soon. God bless you all. Make sure that you're watching the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. You can catch full episodes, of course, on Fox Nation as well. From Nashville, a very joyous, joyous week we've had. God bless you and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.